Just answering questions with lab tech. Someone decided to post a string of information about 5G and potentially what can cause or not cause effects. It is not understood how long-term exposure to any electromagnetic radiation affects organisms. Now, I'm going to be stuffing words in this person's mouth, according to them, probably. That may be their response. That'll be the probable response. But how do we interpret this statement? It's not understood how long-term exposure to electromagnetic radiation affects organisms. Now, there's two ways of referring to that. There's no evidence for it or against it. Second one is we don't understand the mechanisms by which electromagnetism can affect living things. All you have to do is show a study that there's an effect, a real one, that hasn't been created by somebody who's selling snake oil, and we can evaluate it. And what we find is some studies show that there might be an effect based on not light, but electromagnetic radiation in the form of, by the way, light is part of electromagnetic spectrum. But low frequency stuff like radio signals, microwaves, that sort of thing, might have an effect on living things. Which you would assume. That's an easy to assume thing. But actual real science is based on, I don't have to believe in your God for it to work, or your preferred data source. It should just work that way all the time. The effect of me testing a AA battery from a certain company is it should be a certain voltage and have a certain current capability. And there should be some inconsistencies between batteries that would be expected, but they all should be about the same. Me testing out the same 100,000 watt transmitter in a populated area should show exactly the same health effects. Well, we don't understand the mechanism. That's a cop-out. Show an effect first. Well, we do, and then they bring up a scattershot group of things that don't show up. It's not consistent. AM radio systems were put out that put out thousands and thousands of watts and were within a specific number of miles of a populated area. And they do not show any change that would correlate to show a causation. There isn't any data. The only thing you find is if they're downwind of a coal-fired plant, they have a higher mercury content. That's something easily checked. You don't show that. There's higher incidence of schizophrenia. That doesn't pan out either. None of the assertions that people bring up when they do a study actually pan out if you compare it to any place else. It's easy to figure out that when leaded gas was available in areas, especially areas with high concentrations of people and cars, you found that lead poisoning showed up in the bloodstream, and you found higher criminality level occurring, and you had higher incidence of antagonistic and antisocial behavior. When lead was primarily removed from most fuels, that dropped dramatically. This is something you can go double check. The guy who made leaded gas, added lead, won a Nobel Peace Prize because it did solve a big problem. But he also caused a shit ton of problems. This is something that can be tested. It's reproducible. You can do an experiment in a building with animals. Even plants will show effects because of lead. But radio signals do not show anything like that. So if you claim we don't understand how a long-term exposure to something can have an effect on organisms, what you're saying is also most likely that you don't have the data, which would be the first step. You have to show something's going on and then try to find the source of it usually. And then find whatever correlates with it and see if one of them could be an obvious cause. We haven't even gotten to the first step of collecting data with you guys. And I'm saying you guys. Look up anything you want. They don't understand the full picture. Translation: only I and people like me are able to understand the true meaning of this, even though, again, none of your studies correlate. None of them show cause. There's plenty of counter studies that show that it doesn't work. They can make good guesses, they can observe certain aspects of the waves and of biology, but it's literally impossible to understand every facet of the microscopic world. Counterpoint: That's throwing your hands up, and it's also not true in any way. We can absolutely study this. You're claiming it's impossible to study something simply because you don't get the result you want. Now, I'm, of course, just making a bunch of antagonistic assertions here. Let's continue. You can talk about DNA strand length and less than millimeter wavelength all you want. You don't know if it's damaging people. You can make a guess based on reasonable assumptions. Is that a bad thing? But it's a theory, just like all the schizophrenic people who believe a different theory. Okay, next. The mechanisms that are described by your side always involve resonance and shaking DNA strands and snapping them that doesn't show up when you actually test it. And they always say it's based on the wavelength when it isn't. And nobody's able to reproduce the results because they're not real. It's not a guess. This has been tested. And these are the guesses you're complaining about were done by the people on your side. This is about 5G and all the other shit. Being extremely resistant to facts, study, or actually taking you at your word and testing it, one of the worst things you can do to a shit stirrer is take them at their word and double check them, to actually test what they say. Nobody's done a real study. What do you mean someone did a study of what I said? And then we find out, yeah, you're full of shit because we can prove a negative. They don't like it, don't matter. So you just say, no one can ever know. That's like Christian fundamentalists screaming, no one can ever know the size of the universe. Okay. No one can know the age of it. Well, we've estimated at least this old, and we've estimated the age of the Earth at least this old. You know, we know things are at least not shorter than a certain limit. That's better than saying we can never know anything. This unknowing thing, while claiming to have superior knowledge or superior intuition, defying the fact that we actually do know these things, just means that you don't like what you're hearing. I assume you understand that all organisms are electrical by nature. That's a fucking lie. Period, full stop. Most, if not all, life forms on this planet implement some sort of neurology that involves a chemical reaction sequence like a synapse between nerves that transfers information via causing a chain reaction in a single cell that's really skinny that has a propagation delay of like a tenth of a second or faster if you're a squirrel. They are faster, by the way. But they're not primarily electric-based things. Also, that's an extreme... Organisms are electrical by nature is a very vague statement. There's also living things, organisms, that don't have any electrical systems or anything. You're also talking about electrochemical systems. They're not electric. I assume you understand. You mean you assume I agree with your poppycock idea that has never been shown to be true either. Again, actually testing this, taking you guys at your word, we find out that this is shit. Wouldn't it be safe to assume that all cell wall strength, microtoxins piercing the skin, killing the cell, is powered by electricity? No, it isn't, because that's not how biology works. And if you took a class in the subject, you find out active transport and passive transport do exist, and they're based on ionized, chemical reactions in the body, and you can look up bonding, covalent and otherwise. Ionic bonding exists, but it's not the same as ionized radiation or electromagnetic energy or chakrism or rakrism. A force field of sorts. No, it isn't. It's literally like a physical wall that reacts to a chemical key. You're wrong. This has been demonstrated. By the way, there are some cells that are large enough you can look at them under a fairly low power microscope and watch the chemical reactions. There are even cells that have active transport in their cell walls that you can observe with an optical microscope. It's not impossible for you to check. Again, this isn't one of those we can never know things. This is something you can go fucking look at with your own fucking eyes. Be sure to avoid that. Any electromagnetic field change would affect this. No. And you form it as a question. You're making an assertion because you don't want to provide proof. Again, you can see some of these things happening, but they're under, tens of millions of watts of energy, and they only work they don't work if you leave it on. You have to turn it on and off rapidly. You'd have to be sitting on a 1 megawatt tower for have this have any kind of effect. And again, that doesn't show up consistently. Might it be possible that even a new, more powerful grid doesn't affect everyone? It could seriously affect certain people and animals. No, because you haven't proven that it has any effect at all. And again, the one I'm allowing for, because I'm being fair, shows up only under really, really extreme conditions. Spreading out 100 or let's say 1,000 watts from your average cell tower over a really large surface area, it doesn't make it more. It actually drops it per dosage per person per day per hour. It lowers the dosage level. Again, this is the homeopathy argument. Oh, you're going to hit us with less radio signals? Well, that means it'll kill us more often. And then I guess if they shut them all off, we'll all just drop dead, right? Because we're now dependent or something. Actually, that might do something to Tumblrettes. I can dream. So, continue. Next. Have you read The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Firstenberg? He's wrong. I've already debunked that and everybody else has. Because he starts off with a set of assumptions and he doesn't prove his point, so I don't have to look at it any further. But yeah, I've read it and I don't care to anymore. And that's not the point. You won't provide proof. You form things as questions to avoid having to provide proof. Just answering questions, because you won't answer them. I'll answer them. Oh, let me guess. You'll just look them up. In other words, get the counter view from the conglomerates who make money from selling the thing which in question. Counterpoint. He was primarily debunked by medical professionals, country doctors, ham radio operators, hackers, and literally any other kind of person you want to deal with. It's sort of like the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth getting contradicted by people who don't lie about being architects, engineers, and whatever, who stated that you don't, also explosives people who said, no, thermite isn't really an explosive, you idiot. Obviously, that's an objective, impartial, well-meaning source. Just talking about all, the big pharma and the big 5G. That's not who I consult. I don't consult someone with. I made fun of the telephone companies talking about 5G being millimeter wavelength because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Meanwhile, ham operators and people who build the shit can tell you anything you want if you want to learn. It often means you're going to get confirmation bias from multiple sources, which is actually emanate from one person or a small group, or from an institutional scientist who have decided certain things are facts when, in fact, they're just theories. Again, you guys won't present evidence, won't present studies that are impartial, and none of the studies that I've ever seen have ever been reproduced. None of your facts check. None of them work from a person who's just trying to see if you made the math work right. Some guys that you guys will cite, some of the crap you cite, won't even work consistently in their own fucking study. This is like Wakefield, literally using the tiniest sample he can find, trying to prove something because he was hired by literally a lawyer to prove a point rather than come up with a real study finding out what is the cause of autism. I just did a video about the actual health causes. Might surprise y'all. The point I'm making here is you're the ones who are making up theories and hypotheses and not presenting any reason to believe you. You avoid this at all costs. And citing somebody's book where he has an opinion and it's been critiqued and reviewed and been found to be lacking or just bullshit, depending on who you talk to. And every single anecdote will come up that you bring up will have the same problem. I can test your perpetual motion machine theory and find out that it doesn't work. Well, you just didn't do it right. You have to prove it works before we listen to you. Neener, neener. You have to prove your facts. And then we have to be able to double check them, and we don't have to have faith in your belief. Zootonic transmissions, contagion, theory. Electromagnetic grids are completely safe, theory. No, none of you have provided anything, including a theory or hypothesis as to how any of this works, data that shows that there's a problem, a methodology for showing some sort of correlation that proves there are problems, or even show that you're willing to not lie. The other part about this that really is infuriating with you assholes is you just fucking lie about this. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. Your side is just theory. The other side isn't. Go out and do some work. Fuck off.